Welcome to Let's Talk Research. I'm Dr. Charity Marsh, the director of the Humanities Research Institute, or the HRI, at the University of Regina. Let's Talk Research is produced in Treaty 4 lands, and the University of Regina is situated on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. These are the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Michif Nation. Let's Talk Research is a podcast focusing on the diverse, innovative, and critical research that is supported by the HRI. Joining us today on Let's Talk Research is Dr. Gwen Grinyer. She is an experimental nuclear physicist and an associate professor in the Department of Physics at the University of Regina. Her physics research uses beams of rare isotopes to study the properties of short-lived radioactive nuclei that are located furthest from stability. She is also passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion in STEM fields, physics education and outreach, and science communication. Gwen, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about your research and one of your research projects and one of the projects that you've been spending some time with over the last year. And this project is titled the 2SLGBTQ+ in STEM, Understanding the Barriers. And can you just tell us a little bit about this project as sort of an overview?
Yeah, like where it came from, I guess the idea was kind of selfish in a way. It was personal because I've worked in STEM for almost 20 years. So science, technology, engineering, and math. That's what STEM stands for. I've almost never seen anyone who is out or visible in the 2SLGBTQ+ community in science or in engineering. In my particular field of nuclear physics, I didn't know anybody. I've been working 20 years. I've never seen anyone. I never heard of anyone. But when I'm on campus or when I'm in the community, I see lots of people, and I'm always wondering, why don't they go into STEM? What is preventing queer and trans people from choosing science as a career? I did it, but I seem to be the exception to whatever rule this is. And I guess the main motivation started was I was at a meeting, and this was pre-COVID, and I was talking with somebody, and I think it was organized by Your Pride or something like this. And we were kind of introducing ourselves, and somebody kind of, pulled me aside and said like, oh, you're in physics, but I thought queer people only do social sciences, right? That's not the first time I've heard anyone say that, but that is the first time that I kind of realized, like, why does everybody keep saying that? And made me look around more and realize, you know what, you're right. Like, it is absolutely true that I am totally by myself at all times. And I don't understand what is preventing queer and trans folks from doing STEM.
So issues of representation, concerns around what are the barriers. I mean, these are all, things for us to be thinking about. And I think it's interesting with STEM because there is a number of studies and there's a lot of discourse around, for example, why women are less, visible in those areas. But this is, a new take, a different perspective, getting at some other more complex questions. And so what made you decide to do the project in this kind of way? It's a sort of this larger two-pronged project. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about the first piece, this piece around the collection and looking at specific data around representation and who's there and who's not?
Yeah, I mean, it is linked to what you had talked about, like women in STEM. This is a question I've heard for the past 20 years since I've been in this field. And I've looked at the data. I've had all these conversations. We have women in physics groups. We have gender diversity in physics groups. And we talk about this all the time. And yet, no matter how much we talk about it, everything seems to stay flat. Like if you just look at the data from number of bachelor's degrees in, for example, the US or in Canada for gender in physics, this the number of women in physics, it's flat. It's been flat for the entire 20 years I've been here. No matter how much we talk about it, we're not pushing that needle higher. The problems and these discussions are quite similar. It's not about a particular identity necessarily. It's about who are the underrepresented people and why can't they break into the field? And I think if it could be better understood or solved for one, it could be therefore applied to most other underrepresented identities. And so thinking about what I already knew in the past from women in physics or women in STEM, things like visibility. We always talk about, well, there's not enough professors or senior scientists. So young people just don't see themselves doing that. If they are women, they see only men in the senior roles. So maybe that turns them off. So there's the visibility aspect, but there's also the climate itself. Just putting women there or putting people into the environment doesn't make it better, right? It's representation is not the full story, but it's the inclusion part of that as well. What I wanted to start with, because all I knew at the beginning of this project was my own personal lived experience. I know that I walk around in physics, I see nobody, I've never seen anybody. But then I'd always think, well, physics is small. I only work with certain people. Maybe like I just haven't been to the right places, or maybe I haven't been loud enough for other people to find me, kind of thing. But that's not it. I mean, I've worked with thousands of people in my career in Europe, in North America, in the US, and I haven't seen anybody. So if I look at just simply the number of LGBT identifying people from a StatsCan survey, which says something like 4% of the entire Canadian population identifies. And I've met 1,000 people in physics, then I should have easily seen 40 people by now. And I haven't, I've seen 0. So there's more to it than that. And I wanted to understand, first of all, go past my own personal views of what I see to like, there must be data on this. There must be people researching this. What are they finding? What are the barriers? What are the issues? And where should we be focusing our efforts to try to encourage more people to join STEM? And so that's where I started, looking at just whatever data was available. And there's actually surprisingly not a lot. There's a lot of information about women in physics or women in STEM, lots and lots and lots going back decades. There's a lot of information about Black people in STEM from the US perspective, but queer people and trans people, queer people in STEM, a little bit. The first maybe surveys are 5 years old or something like this. Trans people in STEM, it's non-existent because there aren't any trans people in STEM, or at least not enough to have any data on. So it's just a lot is missing. And I just wanted to know first, where are we at? What's known? And can we use this to improve, locally here, the climate in our own faculty of science? Maybe there's something we could do to encourage or attract more people and retain them as well, because there's a lot of stories of people come and then they go because the climate is just not where it needs to be to keep them there.
There's so much to unpack here. I mean, I think, one thing that's really lovely is starting with your lived experience, like to I think as a researcher, to be able to engage from that place is really, it's a lovely place. Like, I know at the beginning you had said sort of, there's a sense that there's a bit of a selfishness in this project. And yet at the same time, that passion and your passion for STEM, your passion for what you do and what you're really good at, and understanding a very, complex and serious problem, and being able to do the work, the labor, and strategize and be creative and try and find ways to address that problem is so key to that excitation that keeps us going in our research. And so I commend you on that. I think that's a great place to begin from, even though it can be, as you said, it's very isolating. You're often alone. If you want to speak to that a little bit, I think that's so lovely, but hard.
Yeah, it is. I did want to add something more to the data, which I guess was enlightening to me because I had this personal experience. And I thought, well, maybe just what I've seen is not what's actually happening. And then I actually was able to find some data that kind of backed up the feelings I had. And so that's been really enlightening to know that even though I haven't seen anybody, the people who are here are experiencing the same kind of things as well. And just to give you two examples that I take from a very recent survey of American physicists, specifically focusing on LGBT plus people in physics, and that's the acronym they use in the United States. They don't put the 2S and they don't have the Q necessarily. But for their survey population, which were, I guess, undergraduate and graduate students, things like 50% of them are not out to their colleagues at work. 44% find that their colleagues aren't even using the proper pronouns. I mean, there's all kinds of just basic lack of info or just basic knowledge is just missing. And we are not, like, our colleagues are just not getting it yet. They have not met enough of us to be able to learn these things. And it's so trivial. And some of that work I can easily do. Like, my work as a prof is a big part of it is teaching. And if some of this is just teaching and education, I can do that very well and very easily. And so I've taken that kind of on as a role too, to be that educator. So to go back to your other question about the difficulty, I guess, of representation. I mean, I know at the U of R, as far as I know, I'm the only out and visible STEM professor. I'm talking about all faculty in the Faculty of Science, which is a big one, Faculty of Engineering as well. And you sum up all the profs, and I've done this, you get 150 professors in science and engineering just here at the U of R. And I'm the only one who's willing to be visible and out. So I know I'm not the only one. There must be others, just from a pure statistical argument, but I don't know of any. And that indicates there is a really big problem then. And that's just locally. Like, I haven't done the survey for all universities, but I'm sure it's very, very similar across the board.
Yes. And that idea of isolation and loneliness is certainly then becomes part of how you, like, your own, right, our working environment, the climate within which we engage. And so I suppose one of the things that we can turn to is, this strategy. So as part of the second sort of prong of this, so you collected the data, and I do understand that idea of, like, having your experience validated by the data, in the sense that there's some others that share these experiences that are, so there's like, okay, I'm not the only one in that way. So that's important. But I mean, this sort of one of the creative strategies that you've attended to is this series of talks. Mm. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that part of the project.
I guess what I wanted to do was show that there are people in STEM, and I wanted to have them come and talk about their science, but also what it's like to be a queer or trans scientist. And the talks were not supposed to be about science. They were general public talks. And, I told them to, yes, mention what you do as a scientist, but no technical stuff. You didn't have to be a scientist to come to these talks. And so I found speakers who are willing to talk a little bit about the science they do and a little bit about their identity and how they have been a successful scientist while having to navigate all of these challenges that their identity may or may not present to them in their work life. And so we heard talks on, and I tried to balance it too. So we had one physicist, one chemist, one biologist, and one engineer to cover kind of the full spectrum of STEM. And within that group, each of them had different LGBT identities. And they did an amazing job talking about, some had experiences in the US, some in Australia, some in Canada, and just talking about what it's like, this isolation, and how do they communicate? How did they find others? What made them confident to come out?
I think one of the things that's really key about this, it's not just about strategies for survival, but it's thriving. I mean, these people are thriving.
Yeah. And I guess one of the questions that did come up a lot, especially for some of the researchers who are not necessarily visible, the big question is, why bother, right? Why come out if all it's going to do is harm you that's the hardest part, because you kind of have to do this, and it is very, very difficult. And yet, I guess some of us see it as because we need to do better overall, and we need our students to know that it is better and it will be better. But it is incredibly difficult, but really worthwhile at the same time.
With that sense and understanding that people's capacities change. I mean, and so we can think about maybe some of those barriers and what it means to come out or be visible in particular kinds of ways at different points in your career. Yeah. Once you're tenured, once you're, all of those things I think can come into play, but it's also around intersectionality. It's around questions of how people understand and the support systems that are perhaps in place in certain institutions.
Yeah. And that's another big part of it. Like, it's not just about, queer and trans students who identify can see a faculty member or a successful scientist. Like, yes, that is a big part of it. But another huge part of this series was to normalize these discussions amongst our straight and cis colleagues, that we're allowed to give a talk about identity. They should know that pronouns matter. They should know about misgendering in the classroom, and not just know it like theoretically, like, oh yeah, I heard pronouns are important, but seeing how hurt these speakers are or were makes it real. And we don't talk about these things in science or physics ever. And so I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to not inundate my colleagues, but put it everywhere so that they start thinking about these things. They start asking these questions. They start seeing, yes, I have seen 5, 6, 7 others before, something like that. Whereas I went for 20 years seeing nobody. So I wanted it to be more normalized for them, and to have, conversations with allies. I've met a lot of people who have come to me after who are now very strong allies, which didn't exist before. So there's been a lot of amazing positive things, and it's not just for the community, but for the ally community as well.
I do think there's lots to be said around thinking about T for T or queer for queer, or who, like that audience speaking to each other is one thing that's so key and important. And then of course there's the piece around allyship. And then there's also like just in that sense of trying to normalize something so that there's a sense of existence, but even respectability on a professional level, like even just at that level within institutions, within academic institutions that are supposed to have a sense of social justice and understanding people's experience a little bit. But
I've come across so many different things, like a professor who misgenders a student, for example. The professor, it's not that they were trying to be harmful. It's they literally didn't know. The education that we get in terms of training as a faculty member is totally insufficient. And a lot of them are too afraid to make a mistake. They're too afraid to ask, and they're too afraid to talk about these things. So that's part of the normalization process, that they can see this. They can know that other pronouns exist. They can know why they're important. And they even know who to ask if they do have questions. And that's been really useful too. Like, I've had people reach out to me with basic questions, and it's just that seeing these talks made them realize they have a huge lack of education. There's a lot of work for them to do. They start doing it on Google or wherever, but still knowing somebody to ask a very specific question about a specific thing that may have occurred. You can't always get that from Google. So having those contact people, knowing you can who to talk to. Before I arrived in science, there wasn't anybody who was willing to do that. So I don't know who they asked. I just think that they, moved on, and they forgot about it 5 seconds later, but to the person they hurt, they still remember it.
Yeah, just even that basic idea of intent and harm done, needing to take responsibility, even though our intentions we're not this, but that we still did that damage. And so how can we work to fix that, right? Like, so those strategies on that level too, with this overall, this project. And I mean, it seems like a lot of advocacy and education work has come out of this for you in different ways. So, I mean, and certainly in that sense that you've taken that up, and I see one of the strategies or one of the ways that you, one of the tools you use a lot is social media.
Yeah, I mean, I do it because I find that's the easiest way to reach out to people, and particularly younger people who want to know that there is a professor who knows about, their identity. I have met so many students through that who it's just really been amazing, but I couldn't have reached them if I didn't, if I put it on a website or, just did what I used to do, which was send emails to people. Like I was just mentioning to you today, I did an outreach event at a high school, and it was the students who, proposed to their teacher to invite me because they heard about me through social media. And so I'm able to give high school talks, and I've been like in grocery stores and people are like, oh my God, that's Gwen. And so there's been a lot of like amazing connections that I've been able to make through there, but also because I find like being in Regina, it's also isolating on a different level. But I do have colleagues who I do work with, and they're at other universities around. And so I wanted them to also have access to these things. And I've put out like educational like slides, if you will. I have a post on like what to do if you accidentally misgender somebody. And I have another one on why is dead naming a big problem? And I have another one on how to properly use trans as an adjective. And the inspiration for those kind of purely educational posts came from actual stuff that happened. And that was my response to it. Instead of getting angry and yelling at my colleague, I went and made a 10-slide presentation on, with research and references and all that. But the flip side is I'm now getting requests, hey, can we use your slides in our EDI training? It just shows that there's a lack of information and education out there, that people are finding a lot of this stuff on social media, and we're not getting it in our like in-house university training, for example. I did a pilot program for I guess it was a 2SLGBTQ plus training for faculty and staff. And we were going over what each letter was of what is A, what is B, and we're beyond that. Like as profs, as teachers, scientists, it's our job to teach younger people. And we can't not know these things. Like I just feel like we cannot be in front of a classroom if we don't know these basic things about our students' identities. So social media has just been the best way I've found to reach as many people as possible. They do also write and ask questions. Like I get questions in my DMs all the time, like this happened, how should I respond? Like this kind of stuff. And I try to answer them, but it's a lot of like work on the side. But still, I do love when people reach out, because it also gives me that feeling of that this work is important, that I'm not just the only one who thinks it is, that other people do too. So
it is a lot of labor. I think going back to the series and the guests, your invited speakers, that's part of that idea that these presentations were accessible and you didn't have to be a scientist to go, but then incorporating their lived experience in relation to their discipline, to their research, as part of that lived experience that they were sharing, and that sort of storytelling, really telling you parts of your life stories, how compelling it was. And the audiences, I know it was on Zoom, it's virtual, these talks where we were still in COVID, but how lovely that was to see that kind of engagement and audiences, diverse audiences, not just a group of scientists, not just students, like there seemed to be quite sort of a larger cross. And so I'm wondering how do you feel about it now that it's sort of the project has come to a close on that level?
Yeah, I mean, I'm overwhelmed with the positive feedback and experience itself. To be totally honest, when I started this, I didn't know if anybody would come. Like I thought maybe it would be me and like 5 others or something like this. So since I'd seen nobody, I didn't know who was going to come to these things. I was expecting only the queer people and trans people in science in Canada might come. So like, how many people is that? Like 3 or something? Like, I absolutely had no idea. And as we went through this, I kind of realized, no, at my position as a faculty member, there's very few people my age. But in the younger generation, the students, the undergrads, there are so many more people who identify. And they all came out. And we had more than 100 participants at 2 of these talks. And all the messages I got, all the like positive emails and social media stuff, that was just, wow, I just didn't know there were that many people who identify or who needed more information as an ally. It was so overwhelming. I just wasn't expecting it at all. But it also highlighted for me the fact that this piece that was missing to me, because that's why I wanted to start this project, was missing to a lot of people. Almost, I've now learned that these talks don't exist. Like we're doing it here at the U of R, but talking with colleagues at the U of T or UBC, like they don't talk about these things still. So kind of learning that it wasn't just like a thing for fun to do, but it was really a missing piece that many universities have to catch up on. So that's been amazing to realize that we are leading something that was truly missing.
You are leading it, and we are the lucky ones that get to help support that.
The other part about the social media, which was outreach, education, advocacy, all that was really important. And I want to reach as many people as possible. But the other side of it was also selfish because I wanted to know, is there anybody else? Like yelling out into the void, please like contact me. I'll be visible, even if you don't want to be, but at least you'll know I'm here and maybe I can make connections. And as part of, I might get emotional here. I will get emotional here. As part of that, I wanted to do social media so that people could find me, basically, and that I would get to meet or know of one other person like me. And I've since learned that there's no other trans women in physics. In Canada. I've met 1 or 2, which has been amazing. You know, met them, meaning we've messaged a couple of times, but in Canada, there's nobody. And I've still not found anybody in any STEM discipline either. And that started up kind of an extension to this project, which is we know women are underrepresented in STEM, and there's a misogynistic aspect to that. And we know that queer people are also underrepresented a lot in STEM, and that's a homophobia, transphobia thing. But I'm seeing for representation of trans women specifically, there's literally nobody. And that's the 2 merging together to create an even more unstoppable force, which is trans misogyny. So part of doing social media was to find more people like me. And through it, I've discovered there are no people like me. And I don't know how I actually got here. People ask me, how did I solve the problem or whatever? But I don't know. I literally don't know.
The work that you're doing and the research, the component, the creative ways that you're engaging and taking up. And now then moving forward and the strategies that you've started to use to do the work that you've done is obviously having an impact. Your visibility is having an impact just by these people contacting you and being involved. And then thinking about generations that are a bit younger that are, you know, I think about my 5-year-old who's like non-binary and very clear about why they are that. And it has a full sense of that. And able to articulate that already at this age and supported to do so is different.
Right.
So at this point, kind of moving forward, I mean, we say it's not just about visibility, but you are like now this, you know, a kind of a beacon in that way. And that hopefully now we will see there will be, you know, I always talk about those sort of ripple effects that, you know, and maybe we will start to see that shift a little bit. Where do you see things going next for you from the sort of research perspective? I mean, not that you can take that apart from the personal, because those two things are so linked here.
Yeah, from the research part, I don't know what to do right now because my research is nuclear physics. I'm a scientist. I'm passionate about these topics, but that was one of the difficulties I had with this grant in the first place. I've never had a humanities grant before. I don't even know how to do social science. Like, it is not my background. I don't know, like, okay, I find this out. Can you publish that? Like, I have no idea. This is not my area. And that's another unique part about this project, is that I don't know about other scientists who have had humanities grants. I've never heard of because my co-PI is in the Department of Gender, Religion, and Critical Studies. I don't think I've ever heard of a physics/gender, religion, critical studies project before. Like, so even doing this is already like going into different territory that scientists don't go, just from a purely administrative point of view and doing this research. So I'm not really sure where this research would go. And that's part of that. I'm going to lean on my colleague to tell me what is needed, what should we publish, like, and what's missing. And then in addition, there are many more qualified people, because I don't even feel I'm qualified to do this research. I have no training in that background. All I know is my lived experience, and I'm not able to like make surveys or do these kinds of things. I wouldn't know how to ask the questions in the proper way. And so I'm willing to help and to be visible, but I don't think I can drive this research myself without stopping a lot of the science that I'm doing, from my science research side. So, but I also do see a lot more publications coming out from people who this is their job. They are psychologists, or they're studying, why are we making these decisions in STEM, and who are we leaving behind when we make these decisions? So those people with all the right training, whether it's, PhDs in gender studies, psychologists, they are starting to publish papers on these things now. And some of those statistics I just gave you about, like, pronouns, for example, was just published in March in a physics journal. They had surveyed the physics students and had all these data, but it wasn't physicists doing the survey. These were researchers in social sciences and humanities doing that work. But of course, working together with the physicist, try to put us under a microscope and understand what we're doing, and mostly what are we doing wrong? How can we fix it? Yeah.
I love that idea of opening up, like, how we understand humanities and who should be doing that work. And so so I think the key around collaboration and engagement, and knowing when you're in a research team, knowing when to draw on the expertise of your colleague beside you, and, in that kind of way is so important. And it's part of this, the innovation of the work that you're doing is partly that. But I understand that idea that, you can get caught in this, and it can take away from your passion, the nuclear physics, like the work there that is, what makes you tick, right? So I definitely see that. But I think from the HRI perspective, I would love to see another version or another, the next steps in this, and to be able to support that work as well.
So one of the things we are planning in the future, and I hope this works out, I discovered, like, organizing 4 seminars myself is a lot of work because it's work outside of my usual 9-to-5 work or whatever. And so through this, though, I met other faculty members across Canada or other people at different universities. And what I've proposed now, especially as we're moving back to kind of in-person or hybrid kind of presentations, like, even if I wanted 4 people from all over the world to come to Regina to give these talks, we couldn't afford that travel. So now what I'd like to do next year is create a kind of seminar series that's led by 4 of us from different universities. So a colleague from UBC, a colleague from UCalgary, wherever, and that we could each organize our own seminars locally and have our own universities support that in whatever way it's possible. But then that way only one person is taking on the kind of chairing and administrative duties for just one talk. And that talk would be in person at that university, but then online on Zoom for the benefit of everybody else. And that would cut my work down by a factor of 4, but it would also get those audience members from the other universities, get them into these conversations as well. And possibly make it a tour that moves around a little bit or something like that. But so next year I wanted to open it up and go beyond the U of R and whatever our Zoom reach is to something more national.
I think it's a fantastic project. I think this has been a wonderful discussion. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the project? I think that's a fantastic next step. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So in terms of like what else, that's where this high school outreach program has started. It was not part of the original vision, I guess, of this project, but it just kind of showed up naturally that we were doing this. And I wanted in the public seminar talks, we had advertised it through the Pride office. I wanted people from the community to join the Zoom call and listen. I would have loved to see more high school students joining those talks because again, you didn't have to be a scientist to follow along. And as part of that sort of outreach high school and through the social media connections, we ended up getting connected with a local teacher here in Regina who organizes a GSA at their school. And they asked, could we come and talk about these things? And what are we doing here at the university in the Faculty of Science specifically, or STEM in general? And that kind of grew into we've now started our own little university Faculty of Science group. I meet with grad students who identify. We talk about, how can we better support each other? What if they have an issue? And I know that my role as faculty member makes things easier for me if they need something if they're not being heard or that they're going through a very rough time trying to do simple administrative stuff. I now say, just give it to me. I will march into the dean's office and I will fix this in 5 minutes for you. And, things like this, just having that kind of network. So we called it a STEM network here at the U of R. And it's grad students, it's postdocs. We have ally faculty members. We ended up putting on a STEM for All night so that we invited 3 different high schools. And it was all of the students from their GSAs. They all came. Many of these students, they haven't necessarily thought about science as a career, or maybe they have and they thought, science isn't for them. And so we're showing them it is, and that you don't have to let your identity choose your career path for you. And so that part has been amazing, the high school outreach and getting this network going between faculty and students here. We're talking about this a lot. We've got a new undergrad course that all scientists have to take. It's Science 099. So any student who wants to do a science degree has to take this first year course. And we're putting a lot of inclusion work and equity work into that course so that everybody knows, we have this network. We have these particular faculty. We're talking about making an out list for the Faculty of Science, which would be really brief, but we're going to get that started. But things like that just didn't exist until a year ago. And we're trying to talk about that now. And then we actually are going to high schools, doing visits, and it's just really been overwhelming to see the need for this. And kind of silly, I didn't think about it earlier.
I think the timing, there's something about it, right? Serendipity of how things sort of line up and come into being, and people, young people that that sense of readiness and they want this, and they want to engage and be thinking about these things, certainly in more nuanced ways, which is really exciting. Well, so it's sort of turned into all kinds of things, recruitment, retention. It's like this.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a lot, but really, really, really positive because we need these things in place.
There's lots of courage, that courage, but it's also that sense of hope. There seems to be hope here, even though problem is huge. At the same time, there seems to be some hope. And, that's sparked by your creative strategies, your innovation and thinking about moving forward and possibilities and making those connections. So congratulations to you on that and for doing that work. Thank you. That's big work.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's Talk Research is produced by me, Dr. Charity Marsh, and I'm supported in this project by my savvy and creative colleague, Evie Johnny Ruddy, and our research assistants, JC Bells and Samantha Liamson. You can find Let's Talk Research on the HRI website or on your favorite podcasting platform. Thanks for listening.